started doing these live streams on YouTube, a number of people have said to me, where are you? Because they haven't found me, obviously, on Facebook anymore. So if anybody is currently watching this live stream just now and knows the link and the address, then please share it. Okay, today's program has three pieces, as usual, with Inde-Car. The first one is, of course, in response to Richie Sunak's recent speech about extremists in the United Kingdom. Now, this piece of pantomime by the Prime Minister was an interesting, I think, and subtle attempt to paint Scottish nationalists, particularly, and they mentioned them specifically later in his speech, as some form of extremist who, as he claims, are wanting to tear the United Kingdom apart. Now, this is the kind of extremist language that extremists themselves like to use to paint other more democratic organisations with the same basically black paint that they already have covered themselves in their own extremism. Richie Sunak listed a number of types of extremism, and he was warning the public that he expected the next 5 years to be a dangerous time for the United Kingdom. Well, that's probably because he has got us involved in the Ukraine war and has painted a target onto places like Faslane for the Russians to attack. And he's now saying that he's going to spend a lot more money on defence. More than 2.5% of gross domestic product is to be spent on defence in the United Kingdom, which in a way is good news because the United Kingdom has basically been shorting its armed forces for the last 2 decades. And the army has shrunk in the United Kingdom to a shriveled stump of what it once was. The Navy has a fleet of aging rust buckets which is trying to basically retire in favour of all of these new warships which are promised to be built here on the Clyde. So Sunak is obviously preparing the United Kingdom for attacks of extremists of some kind. But basically what he was saying was that the extremists he's talking about are people out on the streets demonstrating against anti-Semitism or demonstrating against anti-Muslim, basically hate crime as well. And anybody who takes to the streets to voice an opinion which isn't approved by Rishi Sunak and the Tories. He claims that there are people out there who are using such demonstrations to intimidate and attack people on the streets. Personally, I think he's pushing it a bit here. But what's interesting about his speech was in classifying anyone who chooses to demonstrate in the United Kingdom as a potential extremist. He is trying to signal, he's flying a kite here, basically saying that the United Kingdom's probably going to instruct its police, particularly its riot cops, to get in about anybody who threatens, in inverted commas, the integrity of the United Kingdom's economy or reaching the peace or anything else. But at the end of this long speech about extremists, he inserted at the end a specific sentence aimed at Scotland, where he said, and of course, the Scottish nationalists want to tear the United Kingdom apart. Now, he was very careful not to say that Scottish nationalists were in this group of extremists, but the fact that he bolted us on to the end of this statement was a clear indication and a warning to anybody in Scotland who wants to demonstrate in favour of leaving the United Kingdom that he thinks, or he's implying, that we would be treated as extremists. Now that would mean that over 50% of the voting population of Scotland are classed by the United Kingdom as extremists. That would put something like 2.5 million Scots in jail, half the population being jailed for Richie Sunak's extremism. I don't think any of this means anything at all. This is basically just bluff and bluster from the United Kingdom, trying to scare the Scots into staying off the streets when we really want to get out there and actually start marching and protesting and getting back what was taken from us by the United Kingdom, which is acting as a colonial power in Scotland, having seized all of our valuable assets, all our natural resources, and is busily selling them off to their chums in multinational corporations. And now they want to do it even more with their so-called freeports plan. Now, I mentioned this in a previous programme, but some interesting news made it onto the the channels today on social media, particularly concerning Middlesbrough local authority in the northeast of England. The Middlesbrough Town Council, or local authority, is a Labour-run local authority. Michael Gove has ensured that all of the assets of Middlesbrough's local authority, and that is all the buildings that it owns, all the facilities that it owns, and all the land that it owns, have now been transferred to a newly sort of established local development company, which is what we used to call a quango, a quasi non-governmental organizations. And that would mean it's a private company. And in this particular case, it's a private company which is headed up by a Tory politician. Now, this might seem rather drastic to you, but this is exactly what freeports are going to do in Scotland. The United Kingdom will be able to seize the assets of local authorities in Scotland which are falling inside these special economic zones or freeports, and sell them, or basically not even sell them, they're simply transferring ownership of all of that infrastructure, all of those physical assets belonging to that local authority and the local people, to this unaccountable body, this local limited development corporation, which will then use those assets to form the freeports. And that means that the local authority then loses millions of pounds in assets, which it could use as collateral for borrowing if necessary. But basically it is robbing this Labour-controlled council of valuable assets which it used to own, which have now been basically seized by the United Kingdom and transferred to an unaccountable private company. In this case, in fact, this is not the only one. There is another local authority in England which has had a similar seizure, and these are going to start happening everywhere. As the freeports bulldoze across the United Kingdom and all the way through the central belt of Scotland and up the east coast, this is exactly what's going to happen here as well. All these local authorities, which are controlled by political parties which are hostile to the Tories, are going to lose all their physical assets and have them transferred into the hands of those who are setting up the freeports. Do you want that to happen? Well, no, I don't think anybody wants their actual local assets transferred into private ownership by an unaccountable firm which has no compulsion to look after them for you. We're talking here about swimming pools, sports facilities, playgrounds, playing fields, other recreational sites owned by local authorities, municipal waste disposal places, you name it. All kinds of local authority properties which are currently under the control of the local authority on our behalf are going to be lost and basically handed over to private companies to do with what they will. And that is exactly what will happen here as well when the freeports thing gets going. All the more reason why I was mystified by Kate Forbes' recent acceptance of freeports as something which Scotland will actually adopt. Now, okay, to be fair to Kate Forbes, she was in a bit of a cleft stick. There wasn't really any way that you could refuse this, because this is a United Kingdom-wide asset grab, basically, by the UK to hand over to commercial operations which are unaccountable. And therefore, happening in Scotland, it would happen anyway, whether Kate Forbes said yes or no to it. She tried to put conditions on it, like minimum wages and accepting the rules concerning things like emissions and all that, making these into green freeports, but basically painting these things green doesn't make them any better. Now, we all know that this is going to happen, and the only way we can stop it from happening is actually to do what Richie Sunak fears the most, which is to so-called tear apart the United Kingdom by basically voting on it. So it's not really tearing anything apart. The United Kingdom, incidentally, has been proved time and again not to even be a kingdom. Those of you who've recently read or listened to Sarah Sawyers on her podcast will know that because of technicalities in the constitutional settlement, the English Crown basically extended itself into Scotland. The Scottish Crown still exists, and that means Scotland as a country still exists, and that means the Scottish Crown, which is basically you and I, because in Scotland the Crown is the Commonwealth of the people. It's the people and the local authorities. Everybody in Scotland is actually the realm of Scotland. We still have a kingdom. So the United Kingdom actually doesn't exist as a kingdom. It's actually England, which has extended and overextended its power into Scotland. So to end that arrangement is actually not that hard. And this is why, when I come to my third point, you'll understand why I mentioned Sarah Salles of Salvo, because most people in Scotland do not realise that the Independence for Scotland Party, the ISP, led by Colette Walker, is the only registered political party in Scotland which both recognises, endorses and values the contribution of Salvo, which is the only organisation in Scotland which I know which is pursuing the international legal constitutional arguments outside of the UK and preparing representations for the United Nations and the International Court of Justice at The Hague, all of which is there to basically inform the United Nations and the International Court of Justice that what the UK told the UN back in 1960 was a lie, that Scotland isn't, in fact, in a voluntary union at all. Britain, I'm using the term loosely here, but the UK treats Scotland as a colony, as a crown protectorate, and is extracting or exploiting its natural resources without anybody in Scotland giving their permission for them to do so. So we are a colony, and the object exercise of Salvo's efforts here is to prove legally beyond doubt that the United Kingdom lied about that when they were asked how Scotland should be treated as a part of the UN, and they said that it wasn't a colony, it was in a voluntary union, and therefore it was part of the UK. Except that it isn't. And the UK isn't a country either. It's a unitary state which was adopted by the UN as the identification of the UK for the purposes of international trade and commerce and diplomacy. So the UK is treated like a single country, but is in fact a unitary state containing two individual nations which have a treaty. The treaty does not confer any powers to the United Kingdom, or England in this case, over Scotland's natural resources. Never has done. There is no clause in the Treaty of Union that says England has any right to exploit Scotland's natural resources, regardless of the political settlement. However, what I'm pointing out to you here is that the ISP is the only political party that realises the value of what Salvo is trying to do. And therefore Salvo and ISP are working together. So we have a legal representations being made on Scotland's behalf to these international bodies. The ISP is campaigning for independence primarily, and secondarily for advancing women and girls' rights over the current mess of gender recognition. So the ISP is unique actually in the Scottish polity, because neither the SNP nor ALBA seem to recognise Salvo as a legitimate organisation with which they would want to work. I have suggested in a recent post on X and in one or two other of my posts that All Under One Banner might also like to join ISP and Salvo in becoming part of a larger group of organisations which work together cooperatively. And that would mean that All Under One Banner would be able to conduct larger marches, including members of ISP, members of Salvo, and would provide speakers, would pump up events, would promote events. So we would have a three-pronged organisation. One which demonstrates physically on the streets, that would be All Under One Banner if they agreed to do this. ISP, which campaigns politically to elect pro-independence MSPs to Holyrood to counterbalance the odd inertia of the devolutionists who currently inhabit the parliamentary SNP. And also having Salvo there working in the background outside of the United Kingdom in the international community, making those representations and getting the United Nations to recognise that Scotland is a country and that the English government lied in 1960. If we get that recognition that Scotland is an individual country which is trapped as a colony of the UK, then our situation changes dramatically, because we would then have a clear international legal right to self-determination, which the United Kingdom would be unable to deny any longer, because the international pressure from the UN would force them to allow the Scots to have a constitutional referendum which was binding and organised by the UN and not by the UK. So what I'm saying to you here is there is a way out of this, and I would encourage you all, if you aren't already in the Liberation Scot organisation, which is essentially the campaigning arm of Salvo. Salvo exists on its own. Liberation Scotland exists as a liberation organisation which is free for everybody to join, but which the United Kingdom has sabotaged the online sign up for. So it's very difficult to sign up to Liberation Scotland. But if All Under One Banner and ISP and Salvo all work together, we can find ways around that. I think that this tripartite, this arrangement of the three groups working in concert together for the aim of independence could sidestep a lot of the inertia that is felt in the main party political parties, such as ALPA and the SNP, who are at the moment, their offerings for independence lack a clear step-by-step approach which leads to independence, rather than leading to asking permission from the UK to vote on it. And this is the difference between this group, which I would hope, I'll speak to the organisers of All Under One Banner eventually about this and see if they agree. But if they can agree to work with ISP and Salvo together, coordinate their efforts, then we can produce a counterbalance to that inertia and make progress, particularly at Holyrood, where it's going to be essential in 2026 to get pro-independence MSPs in place who can outnumber the devolutionists who are currently occupying positions of power. And that is the time when things will change, and when the work of Salvo, which is still working in the background with the UN and the International Court of Justice, when that potential will be realised and the political capital, in other words, the resulting referendum organised under the UN mandate, can then be held. So there's a long road to go yet, but I can see this as a potential route to where we want to go. And basically that was the point I wanted to make. And just to alert you to the fact that the UK Prime Minister wants to characterise half of the population of Scotland as extremists. So get used to it, folks. Half of the population of this entire country is now going to be regarded as potential terrorists and should be arrested on sight. I don't think so, do you? I mean, who in their right mind in the police force is going to run about trying to arrest half the population? Anyway, so I don't think that's going to happen. But what is going to happen is the freeports. And that really, as far as I'm concerned, is the stick to the carrot of independence. If we don't get independence, we get freeports. We lose these assets. They get given over to private companies under Michael Gove. If we follow this route that I've been hoping to set up with All Under One Banner, with ISP and Salvo, we might have a chance to do something about it in 2026. That's it from me. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Remember to keep the faith. If you can afford to, please keep donating. I'll try and post another link shortly. It's nice to see that the live numbers are up today. I know there's 24 of you out there. Thank you for continuing to watch. Please share the address of this channel. The more people see these videos, the better the algorithm likes it, and the more people it will be brought to. So please share, please like, please comment. All of that helps the algorithm. I know everyone says that on YouTube, but it's true. And I'll see you again shortly. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye for now.